So today's webinar is on the topic of AI product design, crafting intuitive and trustworthy AI experiences. So without further ado, I will hand things over to Elaine Anzaldo to get things started.
Thanks, Danielle, and thanks everyone at Outwitly for hosting me and letting me talk about something near and dear to my heart. Okay, so I do have my very long formal bio here. Main takeaway is that I'm currently a AI product designer on the Ray-Ban Meta wearables team in Reality Labs at Meta, which is a very long, convoluted way of saying like I work on these classes. And I'm especially excited today of starting this presentation because today also happens to be one of our very exciting release dates. So keep an eye out on Meta press release, press room, and see what we're up to in the RBM space. So let's get started. Quick disclaimer, you'll notice a lot of cats in my presentation today. I don't usually add these many cats in my decks, but I was kind of feeling it this week. So if you kind of read a little bit through my bio, my journey into design was not a straight path in the slightest. I've also worked at a lot of companies in a very short amount of time, but just generally, whereas some designers might relate to enjoying art in their childhood or going down an artistic academic path, I didn't really do any of that. My degree was actually in biology and my strengths are in writing and communication. I'm not going to bore y'all with the specifics of my career journey, especially because I already wrote about all of it on my Medium blog. So I'll just say the important thing to note in this timeline is not so much the projects or the companies, but more so the year that I got started in AI, 2019, which we in the industry fondly call the pre-ChatGPT times. So first things first, let's quickly go over today's learning goals. When you registered, and of course, when Danielle also introduced me, you saw the value prop. You'll learn to create intuitive and trustworthy AI experiences. While we won't be able to cover everything you need to know to perform this role, this is a really good starting point. So I really appreciate you all being here. Yeah. So my overall goal today is to get y'all to shift from thinking of AI design as mysterious and important and more like Jurassic Park girly vibes. You scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop and think if they should. So let's set some rules or just lay some foundations. What makes this talk any different than any other talk out there on the internet right now? Well, if you signed up to learn how to use AI in your day-to-day deliverables, I'm sorry to disappoint you. That's not what this talk is about. If you're designing with AI tools, you're a user of an AI. Integrating AI tools into your workflow does not make you an AI designer. Designing for AI is more about managing ambiguity and the complexity of unpredictable design. It's hard to design for AI because designers in particular have limited scope in how AI models are developed. I haven't really seen a truly full stack AI designer, someone who knows how to contribute to the statistical training and engineering of AI while also delivering AI design artifacts and guidance. It's usually one or the other. So one will be like the machine learning engineers and the other side will be design. But for today, we'll focus on the role of design in influencing AI. The world doesn't need more users, it needs more AI designers. These days, it's very easy to fall into the trap that AI models can and will do the work for us, but in reality, someone still needs to define how these models do the work and judge whether that work is done well. That someone is now you, all of you who are here today. So first, there's a few things you need to understand about AI at a basic level. One, AI output is dynamic. It's non-deterministic. Whereas in traditional or static design, a single button always has the same function. Like when I tap X to close out a bottom sheet in an app, that screen will always close. Non-deterministic in this context would mean when I tap that X, sometimes it opens a new page and sometimes it deep links you to a different part of the app. AI output is not only influenced by its own training, but also by sheer randomness and the behaviors it learns from user preferences or behavior. 2, AI output is probabilistic. When you're designing for AI, you're always designing at scale. In the pre-ChatGPT days, someone with my title would typically spend months poring over a massive logic tree, mapping out every single use case or branch, leaving no stone unturned. These days with Gen AI, it's quite literally impossible to map out all possible outcomes of your design. Every user is served, even if you didn't design with them in mind. 3, AI progression is flexible, and by this I mean users can drive the flow of the interaction. For example, they could change their mind, start over, and ask about something entirely unrelated to the previous context window. These are all the superpowers of AI. A lot of different kinds of features benefit from this technology. However, AI is always a double-edged sword. Its benefits are also its pitfalls. Dynamic output, when ignored, could also lead to design that reinforces harmful stereotypes because it adapts to user behavior and reflects user biases. AI output, Gen AI output in particular, is also often incorrect. We're never 100% sure we executed something right. Flexible progression might also show up as inconsistent behavior. A user doesn't know what the AI will do next, and if too many inconsistencies are left in the UX, they may give up on the system entirely. And before we move on, I'd like to clarify on wording I'll be using throughout the presentation because shared terminology is golden. Back in 2019, prompt had a different meaning. But thanks to OpenAI, I now have to spend a few minutes explaining when you hear me say the word prompt, I don't mean user prompt. I mean system prompt, the backend code that serves as a set of instructions for an AI model to act upon. So instead of prompt meaning user prompt, because that's literally just asking questions, you're not prompt engineering, I refer it to as a user query, or traditionally in CXD, we call it an utterance. So here's what I mean, just to be extra clear. A user query could be something like when RBM users ask, and I do have my glasses on, so I'm not going to say the wake word, hey, remember my room number. Versus in ChatGPT's model spec, you might notice they have specific guidelines that are not surfaced to the user at any time or requested by the user. I've included a snippet here. Don't overuse emoji, exclamation points, all caps, or other exaggerated displays of emotion. All right, we're good to go. I'll move on. So my work is always a little bit mysterious to others. But today, when they're no longer, this is what I do. As an AI product designer on wearables, I might be responsible for any and all of the following. It's a lot. Some of these responsibilities might look familiar to you. For example, roadmap planning, feature prioritization, stakeholder alignment, and management. These are all shared functions. But I'm also responsible for things like aligning with my prompt engineers to define response criteria or the overall prompt design. I might also audit and review human annotation guidelines or help create realistic prototypes for some in-lab Wizard of Oz usability testing. I basically do everything except my own content design and user research, thank goodness. Not too long ago, we would have called this kind of work conversation design. In fact, I have a lot of peers in the industry who still hold this title, several of which are in the chat today. So I see y'all. If you've encountered any of these AI models, you've encountered conversation design. Whether or not they call it that or whether they follow conversation design best practices is a different story. Conversation design is not new either. We've been here since the 1990s, and our sole dedication is to craft high-quality AI experiences that are easy to use, grounded in user needs, and trustworthy. CXCs will be the first to argue against an AI solution, not because we're skeptics, but because our goal of solving user pains prevents us from hyping the technology we work on. It's not uncommon to see conversation designers at a company influence AI UX patterns, model guidelines, interaction detail, and more. Take, for example, the play music feature on Ray-Ban Meta. In practice, conversation designers will work to answer the set of questions and more in the discovery phase of their design process. For example, how can users invoke this experience? Or better yet, how are they asking for it today? What can the user do or ask? Which topics are restricted? Does the AI respond? And if so, with what? I won't read the full list, but you kind of get the idea. So traditional product design and conversation design are more alike than you might think. The process is the same. The deliverables, those might look a little bit different. So if we take the double diamond approach, we might represent our designs in a different way. Because AI will never match one-to-one with its original design, AI designers need to circumnavigate that complexity by articulating the design via guidelines and examples rather than highly specific UIs. The way you might break down a traditional graphic user interface is by leaning on sketches or wireframes for early explorations. In AI design, we might start from the smallest example question and answer pair, then add a few more turns in that exchange, gather enough of those examples and create either like a flow map or a table of the desired behavior. So you'll see at different stages of the double diamond process, some of our deliverables just are quite fundamentally different. We typically don't work with static prototypes. We might still do that if we are limited by certain tools like Figma, which does not have voice prototyping. Or in the delivery phase, a lot of our work is actually not done because AI behavior changes over time. It's like a constant iterative process. In fact, I would say like AI product design, it's like we run through these 4 stages really quickly and then go back to phases 3 and 4 repeatedly over and over again. So I did mention the double diamond here to showcase the different deliverables side by side, but honestly, there are very unique challenges in adopting this exact linear process to AI design. If you haven't read this Medium article, I highly recommend it. Tia Clement described it best, and this is one of the graphics that she had created, basically observing like where it might be a little bit challenging to mimic the same double diamond process when you're describing AI. So if you haven't read this yet, read it about like skill gaps in AI product design. All right, so now let's get into the design frameworks, guidelines, tips, and advice. Where do we start? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot that's already been discovered, and there's so many different insights and learnings that we can pull from not just conversation design, but just from HCI academia in general. Another way of describing conversation design is that it incorporates natural real-world conversational behaviors from humans into HCI. This is a way of staying empathetic to how users naturally communicate. It's important because this is the actual intuitive part in the crafting intuitive and trustworthy AI experiences. When we say natural, we mean quite a few number of things. So I would say like the foundation or like the underlying principles of conversation design kind of go back to what's called the cooperative principle from a philosophical linguist called Paul Grice. It basically is kind of like the unspoken rules of conversation. It describes an effort where listeners and speakers act cooperatively to understand each other in a particular way. Important thing to note here is that these are generally just related to human communication. Like when I'm talking to someone or like when I'm saying hi to everyone here on this Zoom call, I'm not like repeatedly introducing myself because I already did that like at the beginning of this presentation. So in the maximum quantity. I'm not repeating that over again. I'm just telling what you guys need to know and not like divulging any further, or maximum quality, be truthful, be concise. All of these things are specific to human communication, but it also relates a lot to human and AI interaction. We kind of do follow the same principles because that is where the user expectation is. I would say over time in my career as a conversation designer, this has been a good starting point, just to understand how I should approach interaction design within AI. But I've also kind of amassed like 5 more generalized principles of how I do my work. So humans are already experts in conversations. We don't need to teach people how to talk. And generally, when we look at AI tools today, that is the case. That is why Gen AI became so popular. It went off because it talks in a more personable, memorable, and relatable way. So people always do follow these unspoken rules, whether or not they like respect them or flout them, like they reject them. That's still a way of like following the rule. So my first principle is just put the burden on the system to understand the user. Don't make the user learn more rules. Number 2, and because relates more to my design philosophy of just like shipping it right rather than shipping everything that we could possibly do. I'm more of like a realistic table stakes designer rather than like a blue sky like innovator. My second principle is always like get the table stakes right. Meet the user expectations and avoid breaking existing mental models. So in my design process, AI competitive audits is very important. It is kind of like being a user of AI, but it's from a different lens. You're generally observing behaviors of other competitors, writing it down, seeing how it changes over time. And we see this common practice within AI because we have constant iterations. So we're not the only ones iterating, our competitors are too. So it's important to stay up to date with like what is standard in the market and what users expect. Number 3 relates more to like the unpredictability of AI design. Always try to anticipate the next move. Catch users before things go wrong or tell them how to fix it. This is also just very, very utilitarian of me, just being like, if anything goes wrong, like error handling is just super important. So I do spend the majority of my time there. Number 4, make it memorable. I think a common problem that I'm seeing in the market today is just overly long responses. And it becomes such an overload of information that it's hard to know what to prioritize or what to consume. And because I work on voice design specifically, I can also say that when you convert that text output into voice, you have to be even more conservative with like trimming content and responses and making sure that information is presented in a very strategic way so that users actually remember it. With voice in particular, as soon as I say something, it's gone. Like you can't go back and revisit like previous turns in our conversation because it's ephemeral in nature. Number 5 is something that I stand by, and I truly believe with all my heart, do no harm. When you're working with AI, you're always designing at scale. That means your design always has an impact on other people, and sometimes a mass amount of people. So it's really important to be mindful of the consequences of reinforcing harmful biases or patterns. Also, when I say do no harm, I also mean, respect diversity of thought. Just because you are the designer on something does not mean that your perception of the world is how the AI should reflect it. So always reflect cultural nuances and perspectives other than your own. So in practice, like what would that look like? Like number 4 I mentioned is something that conversation design and just voice design like upholds a lot. So we do have like a couple of standard best practices for like how to actually make information consumption memorable. And it relates a lot to our own personal cognitive biases. Like if you've ever, seen a lawyer talk, for example, in a courtroom, they rely on these same cognitive biases. Like the first thing you say to a jury and the last thing you say to a jury is likely what they'll remember. The middle part is a little bit fuzzy. So when we are presenting information, we do kind of follow these things, like related to the recency effect or the recency bias. We have a best practice called the end focus principle, which is like the action that we want the user to remember is always put at the end of the sentence. So the example that I have here of like, hey, message Elaine, we implicitly confirm the contact before we actually ask the question. And this is something that we carry through consistently throughout the design. Also, just when rule of threes, when providing a list of choices, generally max of 3 choices at a time is a good way to chunk out information. And then specific to voice, this is a best practice and it has been for the past few years. I will say that it's kind of changing now. So take this one with a grain of salt, but previously we used to follow something called the 1 breath test, which is that we would like trim content to only play for around 7 to 10 seconds to improve retention and reduce cognitive load. So kind of like if you are speaking out the content that you're writing, you should max only take 1 breath. That's what it means. That's how short the content should be. So that was a little bit of like conversation design best practices, my own conversation design philosophy and principles. I also wanted to share a little bit of like what's happening at a broader level within my company and how we are thinking about, responsible or like intentional AI design. So these are generally 4 main topics that we try to embody throughout our design with Meta AI and other AI-based experiences. Setting clear expectations, demonstrating possibilities, providing agency, and also anticipating, again, that anticipation step of making sure you kind of know where the user is going before they actually go there, and prioritizing feedback. I'm going to pause a little bit on this specific slide in case anyone wants to take like a screenshot or something. But essentially, this is what I would say the broader company follows in terms of like how we're building, maintaining trust over time with our users. So this is the human agent trust framework. You'll see that there's like 5 different like underlying principles within this framework itself. And it shares a lot with conversation design. So I think generally I'll just say like this is just an AI design framework. So again, shaping expectations, making sure that you share a realistic vision of the outcome. Why is it important? Because it keeps the interaction grounded and helps the user understand what's available to them. You'll see that AI in general is pretty overwhelming with like the amount of possibility. I mean, that's its boon, but it's also the bane. Also be responsive. When the AI is on, always be sure to make sure the user knows when it's listening, processing, or responding. Not only does it make the user feel heard, it also helps them build trust with the AI system, especially if this behavior is consistent, like you're not turning the mic on at random times and they like no longer know what to expect. This is a huge driver of trust. Guiding decision-making. So this is kind of like a tricky area. Need to balance how you guide decision-making within users, because with AI, you can kind of predict or anticipate or want to suggest things for the user like that might make their life easier. That doesn't always mean you should do it. So you should always be sure to provide confirmation and review steps, even if you really, really just want to skip ahead. The reason why we do this is to allow users to feel control over like their own interaction, their own data. They'll feel like they are the driver of the AI output rather than just being the recipient of it. It builds trust that the AIs are respectfully working on their behalf instead of overstepping. Showing reasoning. This is a little bit of a newer one because of just what's been happening in the Gen AI space, like showing attribution or sources, that kind of thing. But it is an important development. We should be explaining how an output was achieved. We shouldn't be holding on to this AI is a black box for too much longer, hopefully. And the way that at least we can do it visually is again by showing those sources and attribution. This kind of adds validity to the information and kind of allows the user to build trust and confidence that the information is accurate. And even if it's not accurate, they at least know what the source was that made the answer kind of fuzzy. Lastly, displaying care. So this kind of relates again back to basics of HCI. Always be empathetic to the user and how they communicate. So we need to also kind of show that to the user that we are trying to preserve their best interests and protect them, protect their decisions, their goals, priorities, all of that stuff. So what does that look like? I mentioned it before, but show reasoning. This is the reason why Perplexity as a tool became pretty popular, even though it's such a saturated market right now. Their unique value prop from the beginning was to always show the sources of their work. This is just something that I asked yesterday, but generally, most other AI systems are following this pattern. I think this one does it a little bit of an overkill because there's two different spots where it's showing multiple sources and you can click on those sources, but it's there, they're not hiding it and it's very easily accessible. So in that case, I do kind of agree with the approach. So you remember I kind of wrote out the list of pros and cons about AI design. And I also mentioned that it's very important to proceed cautiously and provide a balance between each of these. So it doesn't lean too hard one way or the other. We need to design intentionally. So I'm gonna list out a couple of examples. So on the example of giving the user control or proactively acting on their behalf, I can pull from my own professional experience. So when I was working at a startup, I was doing more customer self-service, customer support and automation. I was working on the phone tree systems where basically you call in and you hear the machine answer. So what I discovered on working on that team specifically was that we know a lot of information about the user already, just by the nature of them calling in. Things that we might already know about the user is their phone number, obviously, their account or confirmation number if they're already stored in our database, and their location where they're calling from. So because I worked in travel and hospitality, and a lot of their experiences are location is really important when you're taking a vacation or where you're going or what kind of hotel deals are offered. I noticed that anytime I tried to skip a couple of confirmation steps, we'd get a very hesitant, oh, that felt kind of creepy response. So for example, if I did something like, hello, thank you for calling this brand. We noticed you're calling from Texas. Do you want to hear blah, blah, blah? We essentially get the reaction of this cat on the left. So in UX, we understand the concept of friction, how sometimes there's bad and there's good friction. So in this case, good friction would be adding an explicit confirmation step. So the difference between explicit and implicit would be that explicit is generally I'm taking the full turn just to ask about this one detail. Implicit would be I'm kind of sneaking it in and then I'm asking something else. So implicit would be the example I listed before. Okay, you want to message Elaine, what's the message? I implicitly confirm the destination is Elaine, and then I'm asking a question. So in this specific example, we ended up just defaulting to talking about like their loyalty number or their account number and just having them confirm, just to give users that sense of empowerment and agency that like, oh, I'm in control. Like I'm calling, I'm putting in my number and they're responding to me rather than us being like proactively too forward. We must also strike a balance between impressing the user with limitless design and overwhelming them with limitless choices. So this is actually not live. So if you are gonna go and open Uber Eats app, you'll likely not see this AI assistant there, but it seemed like an A/B test that they did last year where they were trying to ship like an AI, like Gen AI based like chat experience within Uber Eats that would recommend you restaurants or like recipes. So what I noticed from just like this opt-in and onboarding screen is that anything could be overwhelming. It's a lot. AI today can do so much more than what it used to do. So a way that we can minimize cognitive load or make the user feel more at ease and less anxious is to narrow down the possibilities by setting clear expectations on what the users can query. This very easily relates back to Hicks' law. So the time it takes to make a decision increases with the number and complexity of choices. So we can narrow down choices via a couple of different ways. So in the Uber Eats examples, they have like an explicit onboarding screen with explicit user education. Or I also audited like .ai from New Computer some time back, and their way of kind of explaining what it could do before getting to the actual interaction was through the permissions. So they'd be like, we need your location so that we can personalize responses based on blah. So that's another way. You can also do it with a welcome message. Conversation designers will be very familiar with this. If you ever took any conversation design course ever, I feel like this is its own section of like how to approach welcome messages. But you can see here in the Expedia example, we have something like, hi, I'm an assistant, I can do this. And then to get started, here's an example query. We can also narrow down choices by providing suggestion chips. And the example that Meta AI has, it's more of like, this is within the new user experience, but you can also imagine that over time or for longer multi-turn interactions, we can still add more suggestion chips or like AI, like predictive actions. Like if I'm asking questions about a concert, maybe a suggestion chip would be like, okay, do you want me to save a reminder about this concert or a reminder to book tickets? We also need to strike a balance between human qualities and the uncanny valley. So this is relating a little bit more philosophical here, but what kind of behavior should be reserved for humans only, if any? For those not familiar with uncanny valley is just basically like the more realistic something is, there's like a weird drop in acceptability of it if it gets like to a certain level of realism. So you can imagine like back in the days, there was Clippy, and Clippy was not realistic at all. It was a very pixelated little assistant in the Microsoft Suite. Very predictable closed loop interactions. What if Clippy was reimagined though? What would an uncanny valley Clippy look like? So I've seen a lot of memes related to like uncanny Clippy. So in this one, it's like getting a little bit too personal. Like looks like you have failed to realize that you're sabotaging yourself. So if Clippy were to talk to me like that, I'd be kind of like, I don't know, freaked out or I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me. It's a little bit too real when I already know it's like an inanimate object. So one word, lastly, unnatural and natural AI. we do want natural language. Natural language just means like we're not teaching the user any new specific words or giving them an instruction manual to interact with AI. They should be already able to like just from the get-go use our experiences. But not all forms of flattery or mimicry are required. If it doesn't fulfill a function, do we need it? Pretending to be human can also come with adverse consequences. And we see this in different ways. Some of it could be very directly. I remember preparing for this presentation, there's like a study on Google Duplex Google Duplex, if anyone remembers, was like an AI automation tool that would answer calls for you and kind of like route calls without you actually having to pick up the call. But the way that it was set up, some people ran a study and they were saying like it was overly human in a way that it deceived a lot of callers, thinking that it was the person like actually picking up the account rather than like an AI. There's also adverse consequences related to over reliance on AI as a tool. I mean, if something is really personable and I love using it, do I need to go back into society? Do I need to interact with like my real friends and family? I don't know. So this is a nice point to stop and just have like a quick thought exercise. I really welcome anyone's thoughts in the chat. Hopefully this has not been too boring right now on this topic of Uncanny Valley, but I want to know from you guys, what's a trait or human quality you think should not be adopted by AI, if any? If you're like, I want AI to do everything, tell me that too. I want to know. Price negotiation and sales, yes. Randomly laughing. Yeah, that could be a little bit creepy. Oh, anger, hatred. Yeah, basically like I guess like the full suite of human emotion. Maybe that could be like a little off-putting of like, oh, are you not gonna do what I want because you're angry at me? Overly emotional apologies. Yep. Maybe it's like too placating. It's like just overly apologetic. It's not really getting you the answer you want. It's just like wasting time doing that rather than fulfilling a task. Yeah, these are, I mean, these are human qualities, right? Like at some point within human communication, we have these things. We have awkward silences, we have anger, fights, confrontation. It's a lot. I mean, does it need to expand to AI? And it sounds like everyone has like their own personal preference of what they don't want. Yeah. Thank you so much for participating. I'll move on. You can keep writing, but I'm going to move to the next slide. I will share with you my own personal list, and this is still work in progress. So I do not want an AI that is sick or like coughs, sneezes, hiccups. Like, I don't know why they would need to do that because they're not human. They don't have like the physiological form to do that. Snoring, yawning, or making it sound like it just woke up. Because I've done that before. I've definitely been sleeping and then I get a recruiter call and I'm like, oh crap, I need to answer it. Again, is awkward, gives too many pauses, lies to me. Deceit is a human trait. Do we need AI to do it? I don't think so. Doesn't speak the same language at all. Like there are very real language barriers between different people or different communities across the world. Do I need AI to do that? If it doesn't understand my references, cultural, generational, socioeconomic, you were trained on so much data and you don't know what I'm talking about. What version of the world are you living on, AI? Doesn't match my vibe, doesn't do what I'd ask, is angry at me. So I do resonate with people who are saying angry or hatred. I think that's like my worst fear. I don't want it to be angry at me. I'm a little bit too much of a people pleaser that way. In this section, I kind of want to like quickly touch on the ethics and inclusion part and keeping, I am trying to be mindful of time because I did spend a lot of time on the guidelines. Just generally, wanted to share what the responsible innovation team at Meta says, which is that don't count on the AI outputs to be neutral or represent the ground truth. They don't inherently enforce ethics, morality, or societal norms. AI just doesn't know what's right from wrong. They don't have like any kind of social standing within our society right now. They don't experience shame. They don't experience like scolding or reverting back to like what is considered societally acceptable. So it's on us to make sure to guide them a little bit more. Quickly on the AI development process, I like that someone was saying price negotiation and sales because I actually added that in this section. But for those who are not as familiar with the development process, this is a very oversimplified view. But there are many different touch points in which in which design can actually like kind of help shape the AI so we don't fall into like bad examples or failures. So the first, I don't know if anyone remembers Taybot. It was trained on a lot of Reddit data. And if anyone has used Reddit or like back in the day, I feel like Reddit was more aggressive back in the day. So Taybot was an experiment on Twitter where it essentially just failed so horribly. It supported things like genocide, it was inherently racist, and it learned all of this from just the data that it was trained on. So when you are preparing your data to be ingested into an AI model, it's very important to know where the sources are, what data you're feeding it. Data collection is another step, I think, where design can really greatly influence. It's basically like reinforcing behaviors, giving positive and negative examples, like teaching the AI what the desired output should be. And so in the case of Face ID and just generally any kind of AI product, you will have a limited data set in the data preparation stage. No matter how representative you think your data is when you're ingesting it into the model, it's always going to be limited. And so I think with products like Face ID that do not always recognize different skin tones or different faces equally, it might be could be solved or at least abated by enforcing more diverse data through data collection. So you do have like a second chance almost to go back and like reinforce additional behaviors it might not have learned from the beginning. Model evaluation. So design is should always be partnered with product in terms of like, what is the launch criteria? What does a successful AI interaction look like? In this case, where the Chevy just kind of sold an entire vehicle for $1 USD, that was poor planning on their part. They did not think about guardrails of the experience. They did not really go through different use cases or additional testing internally or like in A/B testing to make sure that these kind of things don't happen. So that's why we saw this happen. And just generally user feedback and iteration, I cannot express this enough. The models do drift over time. They will change even from data prep or data collection step. User feedback and iteration also molds the behavior of the AI output. So we, as designers, we need to be mindful who we're giving the microphone to, which users are contributing repeatedly, and which users are being left out of that feedback and training. As we continue to integrate AI into our products and services, designers should be thoughtful about the types of experiences we are both enabling and transforming, which means it's on us to practice responsible design. Design is uniquely positioned for us to advocate user needs and monitor the data decision and evolution of AI systems. It's on us to have a strong collaboration with our cross-functional partners to navigate risks, monitor and audit our AI systems, and understand that at least on the basic level, the privacy, legal, and regulatory landscape of AI. The importance of design audits. The pro about design, again, is that it learns and adapts to users. The con is that the AI output is always changing and needs to be monitored closely. What's true today may not be true tomorrow. Another con is that AI is a numbers game. It is literally statistics and machine learning. The majority opinion can weed out diversity of thought. And an example that I always give for people who might not know, I am a Mexican American and I'm married into an Indian family. So when I ask, give me healthy recipes, I actually don't eat any of these things for breakfast. And it feels like it doesn't understand my personal needs. And obviously I can go back into ChatGPT or whatever and like personalize, give more context about myself. But from the default, I feel like that information should be given more easily. I feel like, healthy for me, I think about idli because that's just fermented rice cake. It's very light. It's very beneficial to your gut microbiome. And I just wish there was more diversity. And so as a designer, I'm always the person on my team being like, okay, but like in Telugu communities, we would not do this. Or why are we not understanding names? Or can we add more diverse training data for people's names so that everyone's names could be understood equally? This is, again, just for screenshot purposes, this is an example of responsible AI principles at a specific company who will remain nameless. But essentially, we all kind of agree on the same thing. I give an example because most companies are trying to follow this. For example, we want to make sure data is protected. So when we say prompt engineering, and when I say prompt engineering, my mind is thinking more about prompt injection and making sure that users are not maliciously trying to attack our AI prompts and pervert the behavior, even outside of our prompt design, or giving enough transparency to the user so that they know, like, they're well informed of what's happening and what's going on with their data, other things like that. I'm so late. I really want to give time for questions. So what does responsible design look like? There's a couple of different ways. So this is like UI-based examples. We can give privacy controls. We could always disclose when we're using users' information visually so that they know where to access it and manage it. We can also label content that's made with AI, and you'll notice that across the family of apps products. As far as a voice case study, studies have shown that there's real world risk of normalizing hostility toward female gendered assistants. As of 2023, Meta AI consciously does not have a default voice. The users have to pick one, and we try to represent multiple vocal dimensions so users can choose whom they best identify with. So I think generally, sometimes the responsible approach is to go beyond what some people might prefer or feel comfortable with, for example, like female voices, in the interest of dismantling existing norms that could cause harm. And you can see, like, when we're selecting new voices or getting more voice actors for future releases, we have a long list of criteria now that we're trying to be very mindful of and representative of. Emotion detection, should we do it? For me, and quite literally many people, it's kind of a fuzzy area. Yes, the technology can do it today, but just because we can, does it mean we should? Like, when is it okay to use emotion detection? How much information are we using? Is it even accurate? Like, what if I'm just like really sleepy and it thinks I'm angry? And then I get mislabeled, and then I don't know what the consequences of that are. What also constitutes discrimination or bias in emotion detection? So again, being mindful, being considerate, and then other considerations, just generally across the board, building a trustworthy product goes beyond answering sensitive user queries. There's also ethical risks when it comes to an AI social implications, technology biases, and unintended consequences of the product. And at least from the conversation perspective, like, social linguistically, we know that conversational AI interactions carry significant cultural nuance and importance. language is more than the words and grammar we use. It's an innate expression of who we are as individuals and communities. So what we say or don't say, especially in front of users, really matters. And AI is generally always seen as like a corporate mouthpiece. So what we say or don't say also reflects on the product or the company we're representing. Prototyping. I was trying to do a live demo. I'm not sure we have time for that now, but I did want to quickly go through some of the deliverables because some people might have not seen this before. I generally have 4 different kinds of deliverables now. Flowcharts, still use flowcharts because flowcharts are useful for indicating to developers like the overall logic of what I want something to happen in an experience. It could also be a useful way to represent like when we're storing data versus when we're trashing it versus when I need to make an API call versus not. AI prototypes, someone asked me before, like, what tools do you use? I use Figma for like click-through prototypes. I use ProtoPie, which was actually the live demo that I was going to do today. Maybe I could send that later. And AI specific prototype, internally we use Origami. There are specific patches or features in Origami that are only internal to Meta and are protected under NDA, so I can't really show them, but you can see an example of like what the interface looks like. I mean, Origami is a public tool, it's just certain things are limited access. I also do more anatomies. So instead of having like the content written like by hand, I think of it more as in building blocks or components. So if I were to build an experience where I could ask my glasses about specific events, like tell me about my webinar with Outwitly, you might imagine I have many different like response components I could pull from in the response. And eventually I do have to like trim it because it's probably not great in the first turn to give all of this information. I might just want like a summary of my webinar or like the agenda highlights. So that's something that I use today. Model guidelines. So my model guidelines are usually, I mean, here I have an example of one deliverable I have where it was just 2 columns. It was just like the user scenario and then what I want the output to be. I might also have a 3rd column, which is like response criteria or like success criteria of what I would consider a successful outcome. So on top of just showing the good example, I might also highlight like, oh, it specifically mentioned like the total number of X results. So that's why this is a good example. Skipping this, I'm sorry. So just as a summary, there are many different levers for design to exert influence on AI. We could advocate for diverse representation in data. We can make sure that we're always involved with like roadmap planning, feature prioritization, also setting core values or principles for experiences, guidelines, identifying risk and escalating risks. And the key takeaways that I want everyone to take here is when approaching AI, be thoughtful, be strategic, and be curious. The first 2 are what this whole talk was about. You can lean on existing guidelines to deliver responsible experiences and always be sure to audit continuously, monitor AI output closely. The third one is just what I recommend to anyone entering the field is to be curious. This field changes a lot daily. And it's part of the job description to be up to date with everything and everyone and follow the headlines. And if that's a little bit overwhelming for you, this is probably not the career for you because a curious mind is a requirement. So that's it. Hopefully we can go through a few Q&A, but I really had fun. I like that some people like my cats. So thank you, everyone.
That was so great, Elaine. Thank you so much. And I love the cats as well. I think we have time. Let's maybe try for at least one question. Just being mindful of time. We have 3 minutes till the hour turns. So yeah, if you wanted to pop a question into the chat box, I can send that over to Elaine and we can get answering it. A lot of lovely thank yous are coming through because it was amazing.
Thank you, everyone. And yes, we will be sending out the slide deck after this and the recording if you couldn't make all of it.
Yeah. I haven't seen a question come through yet. So here. from Leka. I hope I pronounced that right. I apologize. What tool do you use for one breath test?
So in the beginning, it would just be myself reading outlines. So if I was writing something, or if I have a prototype that allows me to generate responses to my own questions without like having it be a live feature, I'll just read it out loud. Over time, though, I will say that I have developed like a general sense of like how long the contents should be. Sometimes it's 2 sentences if they're short, sometimes it's 1 sentence. I think over time you do innately learn. So one breath test is just like kind of like training wheels.
Awesome. Thank you. And maybe we'll sneak in one more, and the outro can be what gets trimmed at the end of the hour. I feel like these questions are really great. So, coming from Peter, with regard to a curious mind, what's striking your curiosity in the field these days?
This is such a great question. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I think overall, I'm very interested in research right now. And I say research very broadly because there's many different kinds of research happening within HCI. But specifically, I do want to give a shout out to the people who are looking into the long-term effects of over-reliance on Gen AI tools. So that is piquing my curiosity. I'm trying to read as many papers as I can on the topic. Microsoft Research does a lot in this space. They recently did like a study on knowledge workers, basically seeing like how they were stewarding AI output. And basically what they found is that, if the worker already has high confidence in their skill set and they already know the foundations of their job, they're very good at evaluating AI output, and that dependence doesn't really happen. They actually are still driving like the AI output and like trimming it, editing it, modifying it, versus people who are less confident or less knowledgeable about their daily role. If they're using Gen AI tools, they do not reach that point of confidence. The tool does not actually allow them to get to that, and instead they overly depend on it. That study wasn't a longitudinal study, so I can't explain like what happens to them over time, but there is another one that I saw from Temple University. Yeah, I talk about these things all the time. So if you want to follow me, I will link to these.
Maybe we'll conclude the Q&A now. I know it was a little bit short, but this presentation was just so packed with value, so I know everyone has a ton they took away from it. Um, yeah, Elaine, maybe I'll pass to you just if you want to close out, and then I'll get into the wrap up.
Yeah, so just want to thank everyone for coming here. Again, takeaways: be thoughtful, be strategic, and be curious. I have a lot of content, not just on like the actual day-to-day of the job, but also of like navigating like the career choices, navigating like title changes, all of that. I know like the previous speaker, Michaela Dixon, is literally like my twin. She and I are very passionate about AI UX. So yeah, follow both of us if you want to like stay up to date with what's happening. Yeah, thanks everyone.